Okay, welcome to my layers demo. For this demonstration I'm going to be using Photoshop, but what I'm going to be showing you applies to both to Photoshop Elements and GIMP. And this demonstration is going to be all about layers. And for Photoshop, the layers panel appears on the right here in this area. It consists of sort of three areas. There's a top section here in the layer panel. There's where the layers will appear in the middle section, and then at the bottom there are some icons that we use to create layers, to delete them, and also to create masks. So what I've got here is I've opened up an image into Photoshop, and by default that image is put into a layer called the background layer. And you'll notice that the background layer here is highlighted in blue and it is locked. So you can see a little lock symbol on it. And there's a little thumbnail of what that layer houses or is comprised of, which is essentially the image. And then this eyeball indicates the layer's visibility, and because the eye is on, that current layer is on. Background layers you can't turn on and off because they're locked. So if I click on it like I'm doing right now, nothing seems to happen. So let's add a layer, and then we'll talk a little bit about what layers are all about. So to add layers, what we do is we're going to click on the second from the bottom right icon. Looks like a page with the corner folded over it, and we hover over it and then click on it. We have created our first layer. So you'll notice that the layer appears on top of the background, and the image doesn't appear to have changed at all. And the reason why is because by default layers are transparent. So that it's like adding a sheet of clear plastic or glass on top of my image, and I'm looking through that layer onto my background. The layer name, as you can see, is layer number 1, and it's currently visible. And to paint or to add things onto that layer, I'm going to take a paintbrush here, and I've got a green paintbrush, and what I'm going to do is to paint onto that layer. So I'm going to paint across my image. You'll notice that that green squiggle now appears in my little thumbnail as well as on the screen. And the checkerboard that you see here, the pattern, indicates areas on the layer that are transparent. That's Photoshop's way of showing that that section is transparent or see-through. I can hide that squiggle by simply clicking this eyeball. You notice that the layer disappears, and by clicking on it again it reappears. You can change the opacity of a given layer using the opacity slider. So I simply go up here where it says opacity. Right now it's on 100%. I can start to drag this slider to the left, and you'll notice that my green squiggle starts to become see-through to the point where if I go right down to the far end, it disappears. So you can control how much of a layer is visible in your final composite. To the left of the opacity is the word normal. This is the blending mode. If I click on that, you'll see that there is a whole bunch of different blending modes. It is a topic onto itself, very complicated for beginners. And so if you come across blending modes in a tutorial, that's where they are. We're going to leave that to maybe future tutorials. Down here at the bottom, we've got a number of icons. The trash can is how we delete layers. Again, we create layers by using the icon with the paper in the corner folded over. And let's delete this layer. So to delete a layer, you simply highlight it. So we highlight the layer number 1 by clicking on it, and then we press the trash can, and it'll ask us, are we sure we want to delete it? Say yes, and that layer's disappeared. Now let's look a little bit more at layers. Layers are like a stacking order. So the layers on the top is the most visible, and then layers below it are are stacked on or stacked behind it. So you can see in this image I've got 3 layers, a background layer at the bottom. I have a red rectangle on one layer and then a yellow circle on another. If I use these visibility icons and turn them off, you can see there's the red rectangle by itself. Here's the yellow one being turned on, and then finally the background. You can change the order of layers by simply dragging the order of them. So I can take a given layer here and I can drag it down, and by doing that you'll notice that the yellow circle is now behind the red rectangle. To put it back, I could either take the red square, bring it down, or vice versa. You'll notice that I can't bring anything below the background layer. The background layer by default is stuck on the bottom. If I wanted to actually be able to drag things underneath the background layer, I'd have to unlock it. To unlock it, what you do is you simply double click on the background layer. It will ask for a name. I'm going to call it BK. Click OK. You notice that the lock symbol disappears, and now you'll notice that I can now drag layers below the background layer. All right. Let's talk a little bit about masks. The true power of layers is when they're worked in conjunction with the mask. And what a mask is essentially like the ability to be able to change the opacity on specific parts of a layer. And let me try to explain a little bit better by actually creating a mask. So right now I've got the a red square here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create on that red square layer an actual mask. Now masks down here are shown as a symbol, as a white circle on a dark background. I'm going to click on that to add the mask. You'll notice that now I have a thumbnail appearing to the right of my layer, and it is currently all white. Now areas that are all white will mean that all of this pixels in this layer are going to be visible and active. Areas in which are black on that layer will be inactive. So let me demonstrate that. And what I do is I'm going to click on the actual layer mask, and you can see it's highlighted by the little brackets around it. I'm going to take black as my color. I'm going to take a normal paintbrush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a line across my image. Now you'll notice that when I started up here in the top right hand corner and drew across, you can see my thumbnail, I drew a line going from the top left to the bottom right. And you'll notice that in the area in which we actually have the red square, it actually disappears or becomes transparent. What we've done is we've masked out that area of that layer. All right. Again, let me show you. If I wanted to remove this portion of the rectangle, I simply have to paint black in that area. So I'm going to go and take my paintbrush again in my mask and paint. Now, realize that when I'm painting only on my layer mask, and I'm not painting on my layer. If I was on this layer here and we're now to paint with my my black, you can see that the black appears. So that's how masks work. Let's look at another example, a picture of that background, and below it I've got a layer that is simply all red, and what I've got is a mask here, and in my mask I've got a circle that is completely black. It looks like red, but it's black in terms of a mask. One that is medium gray, one that is light gray, and then in a box of white. You can see that from the thumbnail here. And the way masks work in areas that are black, it essentially is like punching a hole into that image, and what we see is the red background underneath. In areas that are medium gray, only some of the red is bleeding through, and then in an area that is light gray, very little is bleeding through, and then of course in the areas that are white, they're totally blocked and we only see what's on that given layer. That's how masks work. Let's look at a more practical example from a photography standpoint. What I've got is an image here of a number of images that are going to come up to a final composite. And what I've got here is a photograph here of a sort of dramatic sky. Here I got a picture I've taken of an eagle. Third example is my final composite with my background. And what I've done here is I've replaced the background from the original background. You can see here is the original image here. And again, by using layers, I've created this composite. So you can see what I've got essentially is my background layer here at the bottom, okay, my original image. In my second image, what I have is essentially the sky that I've copied and pasted from that other image in here. And you can see that it's only the sky portion that I've copied over, or I've used essentially a layer mask to blacken out the lower part of the original image. So the sky, this is the original photograph. What I've done is I've taken out this lower section by using a mask. So you can see the black section here, the mask has removed the lower part of that image. And then finally what I've got here is essentially, again, I've cut and pasted the eagle from this original image into my composite, and I've obviously shrunk it down and positioned it into my image. And the rest, again, the check marks show that they're transparent sections. I've only copied the eagle over, and by turning these on you can see that this is my final composite or composition. The final thing I'd like to demonstrate is how Photoshop uses this concept of layers and masks to create non-destructive adjustments. You'll notice above the layers panel here in Photoshop we've got a number of icons. These are standard adjustments that you can use to enhance or change your image. Things like brightness and contrast, using curve adjustments, changing the vibrance of an image, changing the hue and saturation, converting to black and white, etc. And I want to show, with using the black and white adjustment, how Photoshop uses this concept of layers and masks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this black and white to convert my image into black and white. You'll notice that a new layer appears. It's called the black and white layer. You'll notice that the adjustments for that black and white image are shown here in this pop-out panel. And then you'll notice that there is a mask, again, showing that the entire image is white, so that it is going to, whatever adjustments I make will be applied to the entire image. And so I can go in now with these adjustments and we'll just play around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the blue sky, which of course will make my sky a little bit darker. And maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my yellows, which of course will brighten up my grass and foliage up the front to change that. And because it's on a separate layer, I can turn that adjustment on and off. The other thing too is if I go and save this file and reopen it, I can go back and double click on the adjustments and it will show me the adjustments that I made, and I can make any slight adjustments here on the fly to my image. And again, if I only wanted certain parts of that image to be affected, I can go and paint in that mask. The other thing I could do is also play with the opacity. So if I were to take the opacity off of this layer, it's a black and white adjustment. So if I were to take it completely to 0, I'm back to my color image. If I go halfway in between, you'll notice that the image is sort of tinted in color. Or slightly faded to give that sort of effect. Again, if I go back to black and white, I can also mask out. So for example, if I wanted my maybe this rock area to be in color, I simply need to paint on that mask. Here's my paintbrush, and simply paint on that mask, and you'll notice that the mask will then force this layer to in this section to be transparent, and therefore I'll get the color to show through from the background layer. So very powerful tool that you can use. Thank you very much.